Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the May 5th Education Committee meeting. With me are Amy Frenzek, Jennifer Ianetti, and Art Lewinowitz, members of the committee, as well as other members of the board and the administration. I see some staff, and welcome to all members of the community. Thank you for joining us. Two quick comments before I pass on to Dr. Yanni. First of all, today or this week is National Teacher Appreciation Week. And on behalf of the board, I would like to thank every teacher in the district for all the hard work, especially this year, but all you do and continue to do for district students and for the community. The other thing I would like to comment on the comprehensive presentation of district data that was shared by Dr. Yanni in the Touch Base Tuesday, providing some real good context to the recently public rankings of our high school for the year of 2018-19. I think a lot of work has been done since that time. And tonight we'll hear about some of the items that are the efforts that are in place, and hope that will benefit our students so that all of them can have growth and progress throughout their year at Upper Dublin. So with that said, Dr. Yanni, it's time for announcements.
Thank you, Mrs. Sherpier. I have just a few announcements this evening. Our community study begins on Monday, so our seniors will be out and about in our community and beyond our community, fulfilling their community study requirement. We wanted to share that we have stressed safety parameters with students. There was some concern about if community study was going to be able to happen this year, so we're very excited for our students to begin that on Monday. And I'm sure that at the June Education Committee meeting, we'll have at least some anecdotal information and feedback from students to share based upon their community study experience. As Mrs. Sherpier said, we did share in the Touch Base Tuesday some comprehensive information about the US News and World Report ranking. I narrated a video that was included in the Touch Base Tuesday. And at the June Education Committee meeting, we'll be sharing data from this year and looking at how we've made not just incremental progress, but how we've really made, I think, some really great progress in meeting the needs of our kids with the help of our talented staff. We'll also begin the comprehensive planning process in the fall. So at the June meeting, we'll give a preview of how that data is going to feed right into the comprehensive planning process. And finally, as Mr. Sherpier said, it's Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week. Mrs. Sherpier from the board said that, very grateful for our teachers. Our administrative team as well is very grateful for our teachers and staff for going above and beyond every day on behalf of our kids. So we're very grateful to have the staff that we do. Thank you, Mr. Sherpier.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yanni. Then it's time for the minutes. I'm going to ask members of the committee if they have reviewed the minutes. I see some nods. Yes. Then we can move those minutes onto the legislative agenda as an information.
You're muted.
Sorry. Do I need to roll back to the minutes, or did we have that?
We're all set. We heard that.
Okay, good. All right, then we move on to our presentations. There are two presentations this evening. One on the Fountas and Pinnell program, or really I would probably call it an instructional framework, if I think I got that right. And then a second one on teaching and learning as things are developing within the district. So I think that's Mr. Hoffman.
Yes. So thank you. And yes, instructional framework, perfect terminology. And on behalf of teaching and learning, it can't be said enough, but thank you to the teachers and all who do everything to make everything we do with our students possible. Tonight, we have 4 amazing elementary teachers with us, Beth Michaels, Julie Rank, Kathleen Place, and Lauren Weinmeyer. And they're going to talk about Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. It's a little over a year ago that we had, if you remember in the Cardinal Room, a video that was shared about our K3 pilot of Fountas and Pinnell Classroom that was going on in our classrooms. And it was at that time that we asked for your permission and support in expanding that as a K3 program and working that with our 4-5 students. Over the course of preparing for this school year, our teachers last year were surveyed in 4th and 5th grade to see who was interested in piloting Fountas and Pinnell in their classrooms. And we had unanimous interest. And so the exciting thing was we now have FPC in all of our K5 classrooms. And as that instructional framework that Ms. Sherpier mentioned, it also allows us to use all of those great resources that we've had in the district for many years, and all of the changing resources that are available to us virtually and beyond. So that framework allows us to meet the needs of each individual student. If you think about the blended learning presentation last month, we saw how this framework is really adaptable to meeting the needs. So I love the graphic on this presentation. Who doesn't love a cardinal reading a book? And so I'm going to turn it over to our 4 outstanding teachers who are going to talk about what this looks like in our schools. And I would also like to thank in attendance today, Alyssa Henneke and Missy Blattenstein, who have helped us immensely with getting professional learning to our teachers and getting any resource that we need in our hands so that we can best meet the needs of our students. So thank you also for being here tonight.
Okay, good evening. As many of you are aware, this is the first year of full implementation of Fountas and Pinnell Classroom for the Upper Dublin School District. Last year, we had a small group of teachers test out the program, and we have one of those teachers with us tonight. These trailblazers generated such enthusiasm that teachers K-5 couldn't wait to jump on board, and the district moved forward with the adoption of FPC. As a way to support teachers in addition to district-wide training, Beth, Kathleen, and I created a DS, which is simply a professional study group to take a deeper dive into the F&P literacy continuum. And according to F&P, the literacy continuum is considered the instructional anchor for every goal, book, and lesson in FPC, and is a mandatory tool for being able to implement the system effectively. So we figured this was probably a good place to start. Our diverse group is made up of 25 teachers with representation from all 4 elementary schools and at least 1 teacher from grades 1 through 5. We even have librarians, reading specialists, and a gifted support teacher in our group. The group meets monthly through Google Meets to discuss a section of the literacy continuum that is based on one of the FPC components that Kathleen will talk about in a few moments. A Google Classroom has been established to collect resources that we can then share with all teachers. The pandemic has undoubtedly created many challenges for all, but it has also created some unique opportunities and forced us to do things a little differently. Our group of 25 teachers may not be able to meet in person this year, but through Google Meet, breakout rooms, Jamboard, and Padlet, we have been able to discuss challenges and achievements, share ideas, and support one another as we implement FPC the Cardinal way. And now, Lauren and Kathleen are going to share with you some FPC implementation highlights.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lauren Weinmeyer, and I teach 2nd grade at Fort Washington Elementary School. And I was lucky enough to be able to pilot the program last year. So this is my 2nd year doing it, and I really only have positive things to say about it. So 4 words that come to mind when describing the Fountas and Pinnell Classroom would be engaging, authentic, diverse, and cross-curricular. And I have to say, both my students and I are genuinely excited every day for ELA. And how great is that? Because as a teacher, one of my main goals is to really instill love and passion for reading, and F&P 100% supports that. So the 4 components that we use in 2nd grade are the interactive read aloud, shared reading, guided reading, and independent. So I just want to briefly discuss each one of those and what it looks like in my classroom. So the interactive read aloud, or IRA, as we refer to it, we read books that all students maybe don't have the ability to read independently. However, it exposes children to a wide genre of, a wide variety of genres, and allows students to interact, hence the name interactive read aloud, with the text. So these stories are diverse. It helps to promote reading. It helps to broaden their vocabulary and encourages students to think, write, and discuss the different texts. There's 25 themes, and the themes vary from narrative nonfiction to friendship to author study. But one of our favorite themes is using humor to tell stories, because when we read this theme, we laugh out loud. These stories are super entertaining. And if you're familiar with Hawaii for Wadney Wat or Listen Buddy, 2 of Helen Lester's stories, you understand why we love this theme so much. For each theme, we make an anchor chart, which shows the pictures, like the pictures of the covers of the book that we will read in the theme. And this immediately excites students and engages them and makes them look forward to reading each of the different books in each theme. After each book is read, we record the author's message, which is a big goal of 2nd grade. And then we keep these anchor charts in our classroom to refer back to them throughout the year. They're a great point of reference. The next component is the shared reading. It's 30 big books, and then each big book is accompanied by 6 mini books that you can use in small group to reread with students. These are original text from Fountas and Pinnell. They capture students' attention with lively illustrations, and they have some really cool features. Some of them have these flaps, cutouts, and fold-ups, which again engage students. Again, all the stories in the shared reading promote the joy of reading while learning essential skills. Specifically, we focus a lot on identifying text features in the shared reading. The independent reading books help to make students lifelong readers and give them opportunity to develop their taste, what genre they like the best. And what's really cool about the independent reading is there's a conferring card that goes with each independent reading book that you can touch base on brief, teaching points and have a comprehension conversation with the student. So it's great if you have a volunteer or a high school student, which obviously we don't have this year, or if I'm pulling students one-on-one, I can reference this conferring card. And then last but not least, guided reading, which is extremely important to help, students at their current level move and soar to new heights in their reading. Again, these are all high interest books, especially the nonfiction. I love reading the nonfiction books and the guide reading. I've learned so much, but they're original text from Fountas and Pinnell. So anyhow, I cannot truly say enough about how great Fountas and Pinnell Classroom is. I feel fortunate to be utilizing it every day. And over the past 2 years, I have to say, I've seen significant improvement in students' reading fluency, their comprehension, conversations, and believe this growth will only continue to increase as all grades have adopted this year. So thank you to the district and board for adopting this program.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Place, and I'm one of the reading specialists at Fort Washington Elementary School. And I just wanted to share a little more of what Lauren had just shared. It is so exciting to walk through the halls of the elementary school and hear kids and teachers excited about books and literacy. The pandemic has brought with it so many challenges, but one major positive that we have seen has been the reading growth in the students of Upper Dublin. And we believe this is largely due to Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. As Lauren mentioned, the Read-Aloud they're organized into text sets to help students make connections among ideas, notice some parallels in the craft of writing across multiple texts. And I just wanted to share some things that other teachers had shared with me. They love the diversity that's represented in all of the text. They have diverse characters, diverse settings and topics, and all students are able to see themselves represented in the books that they're reading in class. One 4th grade teacher shared that his class was working in a text set of books by the author Alan Say. The teacher happened to be in the school library and saw another book by Alan Say that hadn't been a part of the text set. He took it to his classroom and said his students, he likened it to back in the day when the teacher would wheel in the VCR and you would be so excited that you were going to watch a movie. He said he brought this Alan Say book into the class. The kids were literally jumping out of their seats with excitement as they were able to connect what was happening in this book to the other books that they had read in the text set. Another important component, like Lauren mentioned, is the independent reading. And one of the most important purposes of any literacy program is just to create lifelong readers who just love reading. And teachers are seeing that. They're seeing that their students are genuinely enjoying reading. One teacher told me that her class calls themselves a class of readers. They take books out to recess with them, which is like unheard of. They love sharing books with one another. Parents shared at conferences that their kids have really, certain kids who maybe haven't been interested in reading in the past are excited about books and are actually choosing to read in their free time, asking parents to take them to the library or, get books on their Kindle, which is so exciting. Also, kids are really expanding their horizons and challenging themselves as they're reading books in the independent reading component. Some kids typically gravitate to like the same series and reread the same books over and over again. And teachers are finding that kids are really challenging themselves. I just saw a 4th grader today in the hallway who was so excited. And this was a kid last year who read Diary of a Wimpy Kid every single day. He was like, oh my gosh, Mrs. Place, I'm almost finished the 3rd Harry Potter book. So excited and just so proud of himself. And another exciting thing that has come out of the independent reading is many of the intermediate teachers shared that they find as kids are reading independent reading books, they're trying to create their own text set, which is again how the books are organized in the Read-Aloud. They're creating their own text sets and explaining why they feel that these books would go together, like what overlying theme or what underlying message they all have. And just a few last things I wanted to say is that teachers feel invigorated about teaching ELA. They're just enjoying the authenticity of the program, which truly allows them to address the strengths and needs of the readers right in front of them, instead of following like a more scripted style of this is what we do on Monday and this is what we do on Tuesday. Teachers also feel that the extension and reteaching activities that go along with all the different books are so meaningful, and that there's just so many to choose from that they're able to really pick what best meets the needs of their students. And then the final thing I wanted to share is, in talking the other day with a couple teachers in the hallway, they all shared that they feel like this program is actually helping them become more strategic readers in their own adult reading lives. They said they feel like if they had a program like this when they were in school, it truly would have helped them, be more successful readers as they navigate it through high school and beyond. So we have nothing but love for Fountas and Pinnell Classroom, and we just want to say thank you so much. And now Mrs. Michaels is going to talk about the future of FPC.
Okay, so hi, I'm Beth Michaels. I'm one of the ISS teachers, and I'm at Thomas Fitzwater. And as Kathleen just said, I wanted to take some time to talk to you about where we want to head next with FMP Classroom. So this year we've learned lots about Fountas and Pinnell Classroom, and we have had a wonderful opportunity to have some representatives from Heinemann join us for various PD sessions with us, especially in different grade level bands, to provide us with support as we continue to implement this program. And we really appreciate that. One of the most powerful things I think that occurred also is that we had opportunities to discuss as a staff some of the areas and topics and questions that we had prior to meeting with some of these representatives, so that they were best able to support our teachers where they are and what they needed. And we're hoping to have additional opportunities to work with Heinemann representatives to support our teachers as needed as we move forward. As Julie mentioned to you about the Literacy Continuum DS, I have been very fortunate this year to do that with both Julie and Kathleen. I also had an opportunity to lead a different Literacy Continuum DS with another colleague in the past. Both times we focused on different areas of the Literacy Continuum. And as Julie mentioned, this is a very valuable resource for teachers as we plan our instruction to support our students. Moving forward, we've already begun discussing writing and our focuses at each grade level related to the standards in our elementary buildings. In the future, we are looking forward to possibly having another DS and/or opportunities through professional development to focus on the writing section of the literacy continuum as we continue to reflect on our writing instruction within our elementary classrooms. Lauren mentioned the powerful interactive read-alouds that Fountas and Pinnell Classroom has. As she said, these books allow teachers to ask rich questions while reading, and they really are engaging for students. One of the goals that we have moving forward is that we would like to use these interactive read-aloud books as mentor texts that we could use to model various writing components and styles and forms. We also would love an opportunity to pull out some mentor sentences from the text so that we can authentically work on grammar skills using these quality writing pieces. And as was previously mentioned by several of my other colleagues, that the pandemic has certainly presented us with some challenges, but it also has given us some wonderful opportunities to think about and develop our instruction and our assessment. Hopefully next year we will continue to emerge from the pandemic, and this will allow teachers more opportunity to use some of our resources differently. I'm sorry, as we move forward here, they can use them differently. One of the things that they talked about is the independent reading library that that was previously discussed, that has questions and activities for teachers to use. This year, some of the classes have been using them as whole class read-alouds, but they're looking forward to having the opportunity for students to self-select them. So that they can practice their learning in the classroom during their independent reading. Another aspect of this is that teachers have had opportunities to use readers' notebooks, which allows students to reflect on their reading and writing in response to their reading. This year, the notebooks have taken a variety of forms. They've been physical and they've been digital, and teachers have expressed that they would like to further reflect on how to incorporate the use of those readers' notebooks next year. So it's another goal that we have. As Kathleen and Lauren both said, one of the best attributes of FPC is that it provides our teachers with quality resources that allow us to meet our students where they are at any given time. There is not a specific scope and sequence that teachers need to follow, so they can meet with their students and assess what their strengths and needs are, and of the students right in front of them, and adapt their curriculum to meet those needs and to extend our students' learning. This is very, very powerful for both students and for teachers. That being said, this spring and summer, there will be some work around tying in specific book titles and mini lessons to our PA standards and the eligible content that our students need to know, and that will be covered in the PSSAs. As we move into the upper elementary grades, particularly in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, one area of focus for our students is to write TDAs, or text-dependent analysis responses to what they've read. They're required to cite evidence from the text and then analyze that evidence. While the pandemic has certainly made it a bit more challenging for teachers to share the books with their students, our teachers have once again risen to the occasion and found great new ways of sharing the literature. They've used resources such as FPC text sets and guided reading books, Newsella junior grade books, class book sets, and other resources. Teachers are looking forward to finding additional ways to get books in the hands of their students, and hopefully this will get easier as the pandemic gets better. Finally, we appreciate the support of the Upper Dublin School Board and the administration with Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. And we would also like to acknowledge the hard work of all the teachers in implementing this program.
Excellent, thank you. I think, what kept coming to mind as you all were talking, and that I want to emphasize, is that, this framework allows us to get the right book in the kids' hands at the right moment, as opposed to having to wait or having the wrong thing for that student at that moment when they need it most. And so I love that our teachers are finding creative ways to use that this year. Ms. Sharpier, we'll open it up if there are any questions for the teachers.
Yeah, great. So let's see if there's any member of the committee who wants to ask questions, and then we'll extend to the rest of the board. Not seeing any hands. No questions. Oh yeah, Ms. Ionetti, go ahead.
No, I don't really have a question, but I just am so happy to hear all this enthusiasm behind this program. You know, when we piloted it last year, there was a lot of enthusiasm from those teachers, and that is continuing. So I'm just really thrilled about that. And I'm sure that children pick up on that from their teachers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that enthusiasm is very much there. One of the things that I'm wondering is, since you did the pilot K through 2 last year and now went into 3 to 5, is there a big difference? I mean, I assume since it's a continuum, I don't expect there to be major differences, but is there something that you learned from the panel from the pilot for 3 through 5 that surprised you, or that was different that you hadn't expected based on what you did in K through 2?
I'll give the teachers a second if they can think of anything. I mean, one of the very first things that F&P, Fountas and Pinnell will share when they talk about their classroom is the actual physical makeup of the classroom, that there's an area for a large group gathering, there's work that happens in stations, there's work that happens independently, and being virtual and then having some of our health and safety restrictions made some of that initially difficult for us to really process. Once we started to get the hang of that last year, thinking about what that was going to look like this year. Amazingly, with a new program in our teachers' hands, they figured out ways and collaborated together to make that work. So I think that was probably the most jarring for many, but I don't know if any of the teachers have any thoughts on that.
I was going to add on while they're thinking that I think we didn't anticipate as big of a jump in the way they think about instruction from our old ELA program to this framework. The framework by design offers so much flexibility, which the teachers eventually are very excited about and initially scared to death about at the same time, because it really gives them that autonomy in their classrooms to teach the kids in front of them the skills those kids need that are aligned to state standards. So I think what we are taking a step, and this will kind of lead into our next presentation a little bit, a step back to take a huge step forward and really unpacking the state standards at each grade level and looking at the vertical articulation between standards, not just K to 5, but K to 12, and really seeing how the Fountas and Pinnell components align to those standards so that the teachers know that what they're choosing are the right lessons, are the right mini lessons, and that the flexibility comes with some more confidence in the future.
All right, and then I think I had one other question for the presenters. It strikes me that the collaboration amongst the teachers is an important part of this, and I'm curious how you're planning to do that going forward, when perhaps people are more backing, or when we hope that people are more in their classrooms or in their buildings. Will you still continue to collaborate across buildings?
Can I address that? I think that one of the bigger silver linings that has come out of this whole pandemic is the ability we have, or the opportunities and the abilities that we have to reach each other outside of our own classrooms, outside of our own buildings. I think, as you just mentioned, that collaboration across the district has been so powerful, and I think that it is definitely something that teachers value and continue to have happen. And I think through opportunities such as like the Literacy Continuum DS that we're doing, and there's other ones that are going on as well, those will provide opportunities. And I think that, teachers will seek each other out. We have some of that collaboration time built into the schedule, which again provides us with that common time for teachers to meet and discuss and share. I know that through our professional development days, we oftentimes have opportunities for individual grade levels to get together, as well as sometimes like, first and second or whatever to get together. So I think, as you noticed how powerful that collaboration is, the teachers have noticed it as well, and will definitely, seek opportunities to have that continue to happen, along with the support of our administration.
Can I add on to that also? I just wanted to say too that I think with having the Google platform and the drives and the shared drive, that has really, like Beth said, the pandemic has kind of forced us to utilize those tools a lot more than maybe we had in the past. But like each grade level has a shared drive where they're sharing documents and different things teachers have made, and it's just kind of a nice way to see across the district, across grade level, across the district, and across buildings, how teachers are using the materials. And sometimes people will be like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of that, I saw it in the shared drive and now I'm using it and it's working great for my kids. So that's been another great way that we've been able to collaborate across the district.
Can I just add one more thing, if that's all right? Second grade, the 4 of us at Fort Washington got to pilot it last year. And so we, came up with lots of different ideas that we shared across, the district with our second grade teachers. And now that they have experience too, they have found more exciting and different ways that have worked and shared those with us. So the Google Drive has been and the shared drive has been a lifesaver. And I think we'll just continue to share all these wonderful activities we've developed. So it's been fabulous. Even though we've been virtual, and not meeting in person, it has really benefited all of us.
I think along the lines of collaboration, I think some of the presenters tonight are being really humble. When you think of a traditional reading program, you get a teacher's manual and you open to the lesson and the day of the week that you're teaching. And there's lots and lots of stuff in that teacher manual. And the challenge with that is, what do you pick to teach and what do you not pick to teach? Because this isn't a traditional program, because this is a framework, teachers really have to know their kids, and they also have to know how to teach kids to read. And what Fountas and Pinnell does is it brings those two things together. So there has been an incredible amount of time and energy put in by our teachers to make this successful on behalf of our kids. The one sure way to get educational equity is to make sure that every child in our classrooms can read and read well. And we have a goal of 100% of our kids reading on or above grade level by the end of grade 3. I don't think we would be able to get to that goal, to achieving that goal, with a traditional reading program, whether it was a Pearson product or a Houghton Mifflin product. With this framework, the Fountas and Pinnell framework, we are going to have a better shot at achieving that goal. Because as one of the presenters said, there's embedded professional development for teachers. There's professional development and scaffolding for teachers that make them better teachers. So it takes good, really strong teachers and makes them even better. So I think, if I had to pick out, I hate to say a con or a downside, I think the biggest thing has been the amount of time that it takes to get this up and running. And Lauren talked about having her team at Fort Washington pilot. The beauty of that was then we had this expert second grade team that was able to share their knowledge out among our 4 buildings. And our teachers are hungry and asking for that collaboration across buildings to be sustained. And so as a leadership team, that's going to become a pillar of our professional learning moving forward.
Great. Thank you all for your contributions and for your presentation tonight, but especially for all the hard work going into this, and that will continue to go on this. I think we can move on to our next presentation. It's Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Penner on teaching and learning. And go ahead, thank you.
Yes, so this is a nice transition, and Ms. Evans, you can go to the next slide. As we kind of look at where we were, this year and moving into next year, there's a lot of talk. We've talked in the town hall about the ever present word of learning loss, and that we like to look at this as unfinished learning, because as I think hopefully that last presentation emphasized, not every student gets it on the same time or at the same minute. And that's no different than this year. We have some students that continue to progress in some areas and some that struggle in some areas. And part of that may have to do with what's going on in a school year, and some of that may just happen, at a certain level or a certain course that's difficult. So that unfinished learning idea is what continues to go with me. And as we think of that, and I'm going to ask Ms. Penner to talk a little bit about June PLE. One of my favorite things that I heard, it reminded me when Dr. Yanni was talking, that I heard Mrs. Durbin say last year, was because of the framework, she wanted to get herself organized. And what she realized by about December was, as she was organizing her materials, she realized she's organizing materials that worked for her students this year. And she said, I don't know my students yet next year. And that's really powerful to realize that this framework has that flexibility for us to think about the kids in front of us, not the book that goes with Unit 1 in a typical year. And I'm really proud that our teachers across the board are thinking about where students are. Any content area, K through 12. That's been the focus of professional learning and of our collaboration time. So Ms. Penner, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're planning for June PLE?
Sure. So we're excited to have 2 full days of professional learning in June on the 16th and 17th. And we're really going to be working with staff and sort of getting them ready over the next month to really get as much curriculum-based data on kids to see where are our kids leaving us on June 15th. What skills and understandings did they get? What skills that we feel are really essential for the next year, the next grade, the next course, might they not have as solid as we would like them to have? And then what do we do next as teachers and as administrators to plan for September? So we're really excited to spend a lot of time in June having those conversations between teachers. We talked a little bit about the Fontes and Pinnell and really digging into the standards. So the book that the teachers kept talking about is this book, this literacy continuum book. So it's a little bit overwhelming and exhausting. I think Kathleen Place actually took hers to Staples and had it broken into sections this weekend. So the teachers in the middle of a pandemic learning a brand new ELA program have not had time to truly enjoy and digest the entirety of this book. So we're excited to be offering ongoing professional learning within Fontes and Pinnell so that they recognize all of the pieces and how they were designed to overlay. So we don't need to find another program. We don't need to find another resource. We just need to really have a deeper understanding of standards and then be able to leverage the tools that Fontes and Pinnell gives us to meet those needs. So that'll be the majority of time in June dedicated to preparing our teachers to be ready to meet kids where they are in the fall.
Then moving into the summer, as we had last year, I'm going to skip to the third bullet and then we'll come back to the second. We have our K-12 summer learning website. And so community members and board will likely remember that website that we put together last year, where an elementary student, for example, getting ready for first grade could click on that getting ready for first grade web site and have some interactive instructional resources, some games. It gives some information for parents about how to prepare their students. If you're in the car and want to practice words or vocabulary or spelling, here are some strategies that you can use. And that goes K-12. We include on this website our middle and high school summer reading, which has a couple different focus areas for this year that will be announced soon. We also include the AP summer assignment pages and materials and contact information. So this one website will encompass all of the K-12 enrichment, optional enrichment for our students and families to explore as they prepare. So that's the family side. From a staff perspective, building on a lot of the energy that we had last year, we're going to continue to offer some summer staff development opportunities. in the form of some book studies, some in the areas of blended learning, some in the areas of assessment, some in the areas of meeting the needs of different learners in a classroom. And so out of teaching and learning over the next few weeks, we'll be providing some of those opportunities. Additionally, as we've been talking to the board at some previous ed committees, our high school is currently in that schedule review process. And so what we want to be able to do in June at all secondary, 6 through 12, as part of our curriculum review cycle, is to identify what courses need a little bit of additional structure or routine. As you know, Dr. Perez has been looking at some of the equity audit, leading some of that work. Blended learning has caused our teachers to shift a little bit of what we're doing in our classes, or a lot in some cases. And so we're going to give our teachers time in June to work through that, and then offer them some additional time over the summer to work through some of those courses, whether it's revamping or redesigning altogether. Mr. Schultz and I were talking just yesterday about the idea of saying to students at the high school, if you could take any class, or if you wish that there was any class that was offered, what would it be? And to really start to engage students in that, so that we're building courses that students are interested in, that we're looking at higher education and in local peer districts and national peer districts to make sure that our program of studies reflects the incredible district that we have. So that work will be ongoing over the course of the summer. We'll continue to engage some of our connections with some of our makerspace and our STEM work for teachers, so that we can continue to integrate that. As you know, and you heard in the FPC presentation, K-12 writing, K-12 tech integration, K-12 STEM integration will be continuing to be a focus as we look at this work. And then that will take us to August and September professional learning. And Ms. Penner, I'll just finish that piece, where we'll continue to look at blended learning. We have some special guests that we'll be bringing for our teachers in the fall that I won't release yet, but we're excited to bring some of that information and continue to meet our students where they are in September with the information that we have.
I just wanted to add on one piece to that. I think one of the other pieces that we're really mindful of and also preparing for is that for many of our students, when they walk in the doors in September, that'll be the first time they've been back in school since March of 2020. So one of the things we're working with our staff and with our student services and counselors on is bringing some additional resources to the classrooms, to the buildings, to really work on the sort of reacclimating kids to school and reteaching some of those expected behaviors, building classroom communities, working through some self-advocacy pieces, and just being ready for to support the whole child when all kids are coming back to us next year.
Thank you. Yeah, that was on my notes and I forgot to say it. So thanks, Mrs. Penner. Any questions, Ms. Sherpier?
Well, any questions from the committee or the board? All right. I have one question about the summer learning website. Is there any opportunity in that where students can interact or ask questions to the teachers, or support, to get some individual support if they need that?
Yeah, so last year, and that's a great question, thank you. Last year, we had those opportunities in a few different ways. We worked with Robert's son with First in Math as an example to make sure that our students had access to that program over the course of the summer. And there are ways that staff members and students can communicate safely through that portal, for example, where you can make connections, you can set goals, you can reach out to students and that sort of thing. We had teachers, Mrs. Cherry at Maple Glen, for example, did a summer book club geared toward elementary, and they met on Google Meets and had some interactive options there. Some of our high school courses do encourage some collaboration, optional collaboration on Google, on Schoology discussions, etc., over the course of the summer as part of that summer work. So it's not I can't say that it's a universal, every teacher or every course has that option, but we do work through some of that, because at the root and where we got there last year was that adult connection is really important and powerful, as Ms. Penner was saying. And so we want to make sure we have some of those opportunities, and summer reading program, for example, helps us to do that.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions? I'm not seeing any. All right, well, thank you so much then for these two presentations and the look forward. And let's move on to item 6 on the agenda. That is a enrollment report, and I don't know if there are any comments from the administration on the enrollment report.
No, nothing on the enrollment report, but just as a reminder, we did a demographic study. Our executive leadership team is meeting with the demographer next Thursday morning, and the board should expect a presentation at the legislative meeting on the results of the demographic study.
All right, great. I look forward to that. Then the second item is an agreement between Upper Dublin High School and Arcadia University related to an astronomy course. And Mr. Hoffman, is there any more?
Yes, this is just a standard. My understanding is that it's standard from past years. This current school year, we have not had this articulation agreement because the planetarium hasn't been open as a result of the health and safety plan enclosures. But this is just bringing that back. It allows our students to have access to Arcadia University credit for courses, which is always a good thing and a good opportunity for our students. So this will be for next school year.
Great. And I think I learned today that that is also available to members of staff if they want to continue their education.
Yes.
A nice bonus. So I think members of the committee, are we okay moving this on to the legislative?
I do have a question, if that's okay, teacher.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we know how many students every year? I think it's available. Is it available for 2 students per year at the discount? And do we usually get those 2 every year? Okay.
I believe so. I'll go back and check to see if there were any years where we didn't have students, but I believe both spots are taken every year.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
That
was my only question.
Yeah, thank you. And are we okay moving this on?
Yes.
Yes.
Tizia, you're muted.
Oh, there's something funky with my microphone. My apologies. I see 2 conferences listed. One is an AP Chem one, and then one is an AP PBL series one. What I'm curious about there is, are these virtual or are they in person?
I am checking. I believe that these are virtual. I believe. Yes, I'm seeing a shake from Dr. Yanni. Yeah, I was trying to pull that up, but yes, virtual. And these are typically for teachers who are teaching an AP course, either for the first time or a refresher for teachers.
Yeah, no, I was just curious if they were in person, because that's, especially with these 2, chemistry and PBL are probably ones that in person would be a little different. But all right. Any questions, comments from the board? No? Then let's move this on also to the legislative agenda. I think that gets us to community input. I'm going to ask members of the community who want to address the board to please raise their hand, and then Ms. Evans will let them in. And as you speak, please state your name and where you reside in the district. And there is a 4-minute time limit on your input. Well, Ms. Evans, if you...
I don't see any virtual hands raised.
Okay, let's give it a moment. All right, seeing no hands, then I will close community input. Then are there members of the board who want to have any comments on anything that came up today or otherwise? No. All right, then I can just want to inform you that our next education meeting will be on Wednesday, June 2nd. And I wish everybody a good rest of the week. Happy Mother's Day. Enjoy prom for our seniors and their dates. And I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much for joining. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks,
Good night.
Mrs. Sherpier. I think we're all going to be staying on the line, those of us continuing for policy. And Dr. Yanni, Ms. Evans, if you are comfortable, I'd like to roll right into that meeting unless others need a few minutes break, committee members. All right.
Good.
Thank you very much. So that being said, since we are on a roll, I would like to call to order this evening's policy committee meeting of the Upper Dublin Board of School Directors. And it is May 5th, and it is currently, my clock says 6:52 p.m. So welcome to everyone. This evening I have with me committee members, Ms. Ianniti, Mr. Wallach, and I'm going to scroll down, and there is Mr. Sirota. Welcome. And we also have most of our other board members as well. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Yanni, do we have any announcements this evening?
There are no announcements this evening.
Very good. All right, we have one set of minutes from April 7th. Does anybody have any comments or questions right now regarding the minutes? All right, if not, we will move those forward to the legislative meeting. And if there's any last minute comments or questions, please get them to Ms. Evans. All right, well, let's get started right off the bat. We've got 3-second readings this evening. And what we will do, as has been practiced over the last few months, I will ask Dr. Yanni to make some comments about some of the changes that are being proposed, and then we will of course have some time for discussion. So our first policy that we'll be looking at tonight is policy number 204, attendance. Dr. Yanni.
Thank you, Mrs. Francic. So the purpose of this policy is to memorialize attendance procedures for the district, obviously. The conversation that dominated our time on this policy during the last meeting was language added to the policy so that it applied to students who are learning in person and students that are learning virtually. So that language has been added to guidelines number 1 on page 2 of the policy. And I'm just going to read it just so that everyone knows what we're saying. So attendance shall be required of all students during the days and hours that school is in session, except that authorized staff may excuse a student for temporary absences upon the receipt of satisfactory evidence of mental, physical, or other urgent reasons that may reasonably cause the student's absence. All other absences shall be deemed excused. For students attending school in person, attendance will be taken at the start of each school day and at the start of each academic period, and then in parentheses for secondary students. For students attending school virtually, attendance will be taken at the start of each school day and at the start of each academic period, and in parentheses for secondary students. and at the start of each subject for elementary students. There's a natural distinction between elementary students and secondary students, and that's because obviously secondary students visit multiple teachers in a day. So I'm comfortable with that language. I looked to see what some of our peer districts were doing. They have similar language. So barring any objection from the committee or any other ideas from the committee, I'd like to move this forward.
Sorry about that. It was on mute. Excellent. Colleagues, board colleagues, Mr. Schroeder.
So just one comment, that new language says that authorized staff may excuse a student, and it doesn't define in here who the authorized staff is. It could, I mean, presumably it'd be established in the administrative regulation, but it does beg the question. I wonder if we should be explicit that that is one of the things that needs to be defined under delegation of responsibility, perhaps. Or we could define it here. But if we're sort of calling on authorized staff here, I feel like we need to have some sort of tie to something.
Sure, I can define that. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anybody else on the board have any other comments or questions? We did have a very thorough discussion about this last month. And I really think, Dr. Yanni, appreciate the significant time you spent getting this to address some of the changes that we're seeing in the landscape around virtual.
No problem.
All right, Mr. Schroeder, is that an additional hand? Or are you okay?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Very good. Well, thank you for that, friends. It looks like my screen has shifted here and I am stuck on my screen.
920 communication.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
I'm stuck. Yes, please, 920, Dr. Yanni.
So the purpose of this policy is really to define what's permissible and not permissible in district communications. We talked at the last meeting about a number of things, particularly when you look at page 2 of the policy, criteria for content. So the board prohibits posting and distributing on school property any literature or material that, and then it articulates things that are partisan and political nature, promotes or denigrates other religions, and it goes down. And then we said, when we looked at number 9, it says, it used to say, is not in the best interests of students, staff, or schools in the opinion of the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. And none of us felt that that language felt like policy language or that was really appropriate. So I made the change to say is not or is inconsistent with this district policy. So this policy will be reviewed with all of our building principals and assistant principals and ed leaders to make sure that everyone understands the types of things that we can disseminate and not. Even though it seems pretty clear, things like this is where districts can unknowingly go awry. So we'll make sure that this information is clearly reviewed with all of our administrators.
Great, thank you. Committee members, any comments or questions about that? Mr. Schroeder.
I just say we had a long conversation about this particular clause last month, and I think this is an excellent solution to that discussion.
Thank you.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I agree, and it's very much appreciated. Looking good. So appears colleagues on the committee, we can move this forward to legislative meeting as well. And last up for our second readings, 921 copy of alcohol possession and use policy. Reading right from the paper there.
This is a reminder for folks that were listening. We decided to keep this policy focused on alcohol because over the next couple of months, we're going to have some more work on policies around other substances. So we had some conversation around what the definition of under the influence means. And I pulled this definition from the most updated literature that's coming out of PDE. So being unable to perform motor tasks, I accidentally put the word move in there, so that comes out. But being unable to perform motor tasks, speak, or comprehend as a result of consumption of alcohol. I think that's still broad. I don't know a great way to make it more narrow. Oh, I see Mr. Sirota's hand went up. So maybe Mr. Sirota has an idea.
Well, I don't know that I have a good way to make it more narrow. I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it's way, well, actually it's too narrow. Being unable to perform motor tasks is, I think, beyond what I would call under the influence for the purposes of our policy. Like, I think being unable to speak, you can be really drunk and still be kind of able to speak. You don't necessarily speak clearly or well or enunciate, but you speak. And so I think it's actually too narrow as it is. Now, I love the idea of taking the definition from somewhere else. This is a problem that has been solved somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think we should be trying to reinvent it, but I think this definition is way too, you got to be way too drunk for this to qualify here.
Well, I think it's possible that a very small tweak of just being impaired in the performance of motor tasks, speaking or comprehension, something, I see what you're saying, and just tweaking unable to impaired or something of that ilk. Jeff, do you have another? Jeff's good at wordsmithing.
I was going to say, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Great. Success. Other members of the board, any comments or questions? Again, we have had some discussion about this in the past, and I do like the direction we're going here in terms of keeping alcohol its own separate category, because we're going to have a lot to work with the other substances down the road. All right. Very good. Seeing none, colleagues on, oh, did I miss somebody?
Say this, Mrs. Francic, I think
sure.
What's going to wind up happening is at some point after we have a bunch of these policies for the different prohibited substances, I think at some point, like we did with some of the policies in the 900s, we'll wind up having an umbrella policy that talks about controlled substances, prohibited substances, and some of these might actually become ARs under each of the I can't even speak tonight.
That's good. I got you.
Under the umbrella policy.
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, I was not able to get my words out there.
Oh, it's getting late. It's okay.
It's an ironic time for that.
Right? Yes. As I said it, I realized.
That went right over my head. Good pickup, Mr. Schroeder. Okay, so committee colleagues, appears we can go ahead and move this forward to legislative meeting.
Agreed.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so now we have 3 first readings this evening, and the first is 206, assignment to schools within the district. Dr. Yanni.
Yeah, so just for everyone's information, we have 4 catchment areas in the district. Each catchment area has an elementary school in it, and typically, unless parents, guardians, families request a variance, students attend that elementary school. This policy really talks about looking at the existing catchment areas and making some recommendations when we might need to redistrict. It's not something that comes up often in districts, but it is something that periodically boards may want to look at. There is no general rule of thumb or quote unquote best practice for times to look at that. So I'm comfortable with the language, the way it is around looking at each of the attendance areas. The second part where we talk about assigning students to schools other than their attendance area. Each year we get a number of variance requests. This year we have about 11 families that have requested that their children go to other elementary schools. Many times it's because families have moved within the district, and so they want their children to finish out their elementary years at a specific elementary school. So I'm comfortable with the way that's written, but in the last sentence, it says, if the district consents to such a request, the school's parents and guardians will be responsible for the daily transportation of their child to and from school. I'd like to change that to say we'll be responsible for coordinating transportation to and from school, because sometimes there are some extenuating circumstances. The daycare or the babysitter, et cetera, or there are some other family circumstances. So I'm very comfortable with changing that to say for coordinating transportation.
And Dr. Yanni, would that last statement also cover, for example, maybe a student with special education needs whose parents have made a specific request, but they need specialized transportation?
So if students have an IEP, then, and we, in those cases, Mrs. Francic, we would say your needs are going to be best met, say at Thomas Fitzwater, the district would provide that transportation.
Because it's the district's recommendation. Great, thanks for the clarification.
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Sirota, begin us off.
I have two comments on this one. First, under guidelines, the first sentence under guidelines, and you just talked about this, Steve, the superintendent or designee shall review existing attendance. It no longer says anything about when. And I know you were saying that, we don't want to enforce a specific regular period. But when it just says, it begs the question, as needed, or, something like that. I think just something to answer the when part would be helpful for me.
So I'm comfortable putting that in. Are you comfortable with the word periodically there?
No, I don't think you are, because
No.
periodically means, really means a consistent period of time. And I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
So,
Agreed.
yeah, so if the committee is fine with as needed, I can add that. That's no problem.
Okay, and then the other one is your new change to that last sentence, adding coordinating. I like the way it reads responsible. They're responsible for the transportation. If they're delegating that responsibility to a caretaker of some sort, they're still responsible for it. I think what we want to say is we're not responsible for it. Rather than say who is, maybe we just want to say that we're not.
Okay.
The district will not provide transportation, or some such language. That's all I have. If anyone has comments on that comment, I'm happy to engage in discussion on it.
Can I look at that and maybe circle back with the committee tomorrow after I think about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Take your time.
This is first reading anyway.
Yeah.
Good.
I actually want to look at, there are not many school districts that do variances, or there's the process for getting a variance is much more complex than what we have here. I want to look at one or two of the other districts that I know have a similar process for looking at variances to see their wording and see how they capture that. And then I'll circle back with the committee.
Thanks, that sounds good.
Great.
All right. Seeing no other comments on this item, we'll look forward to some adaptations and then moving this along for a second reading, short of something major changing. And that leads us to 216 student records.
So student records are protected information in a school district. So the whole purpose of this policy is really to explain or to set out to explain how we handle those student records. Some of the changes that we made under the delegation of responsibility, it said the designated administrator. Student records really fall under the Director of Student Services. So actually it should say the Director of Student Services or designee. I apologize, I missed that. And then in the guidelines, the district's plan for compilation, retention, disclosure, and security of student records shall provide for the following, consistent with this and other district policies. Because when this policy gets finalized, PSBA will go in and do all the cross references. So I wanted to make sure that we had language that said consistent with other policies. And then we have 7 guidelines there. Now, Mrs. Francic, I know you asked previously about electronic records. So for example, students graduate this year, they have a Google account. When they graduate, they no longer have access to that Google account, but we still hold on to records under the retention policy, which is 6 years. So Dr. Perez and I will be looking at the existing administrative regulation and seeing, once this policy gets approved, what we need to do with the administrative regulation to make sure that it's appropriate. Great.
Mr. Sirota.
The list of 7 guidelines appears to be lacking an 8th, unless this list came straight out of school code, in which case I don't want to touch it. But if it's ours, then I would add destruction of those records at the appropriate time, as again, consistent with district policy. But I think it's important.
So we can add a number 8. That when I can add number 8, the destruction, right?
Yeah.
Got it. And I can pull that. We recently had, in the last couple of months, we talked about destruction of records. So I can go back and pull the language that I don't remember, I think it was maybe the February meeting. So I can go back and look and see how we captured that. It's no problem.
Yeah. That's all I had.
Okay. Anybody else on the committee or board? I think we did a fair amount of kind of reading and preparing on this one as well. And I do think that piece around technology and kind of portfolios and things that students have created and what we need to hold on to, I think that's a great piece for you guys. So thanks for looking into that for us.
No problem.
All right, seeing that there's no major concerns, again, that looks like it can go ahead for a second read. And that brings us to our last item for first reading, 248, prohibited harassment by and of students.
So this is a rather large policy. Now, it's not just in its length, but what the subject matter of it. So obviously we want an environment where we know very clearly what is right, what is wrong, what prohibited harassment is. And just for folks that might be listening, I want to read the definition because I think it's important that everyone is grounded in the definition. So prohibited harassment shall mean verbal, written, graphic, or physical conduct relating to an actual or perceived race, color, age, creed, religion, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, ancestry, national origin, handicap, or disability when such conduct, and then it lists out 3 conditions. So it's sufficiently severe and persistent or pervasive, has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with students' education, and it really adversely affects a student's educational opportunities. That definition is the accepted definition and that 3-pronged approach. I wanted to make sure because it felt very wordy, but we need to capture a lot in that definition. And I looked at what some other districts were doing with their policies, and it's very, very similar.
Mr. Sirota.
Just to clarify for everybody, Steve, just make sure I'm right. The word prohibited harassment is a little bit weird because it sort of implies that there's also some form of allowed harassment, but correct. We're not choosing to use that word. That is a word that comes from elsewhere.
Right, correct. Right, and that, thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Sirota, because that's one of the things we don't want people to think, that there is some harassment that we allow or condone.
The other piece that I had asked about, and I think it's just fair for the community to understand, is that a lot of this policy work, policy revision is also coming out of Title IX regulations that have been updated over the last year. We've, as a district and a board, received training, and it could all again change and move with a new federal administration. So Steve, you had some thoughts about that as well.
I did. So this is one of the policies that I will put on our annual review so that we look at this every year. You know, the Title IX regulations, you know, we were developed on that last summer. And you're right, Mrs. Francic, there could be some changes. This policy will remain on our annual list. And of course, if say over the summer or even earlier early in next school year, we see changes, we'll bring this back, you know, for review.
Great. Anybody else have comments or questions? It is a rather meaty policy. Yes.
I do just want to say, I talked with the principals today, actually, in a principals meeting. Our student handbooks are ginormous. And I think when you go to the student handbook and the first thing you see is there's like 49 pages, people tune out. So what we're really going to do this summer is pare down our family handbooks so that we make sure that the most important information that families need to know is really overt, really, really clear. So people don't have to wade through endless pages and pages and pages of information.
Well, okay, excellent. Mr. Wallach.
Yeah, Dr. Yanni, to that point, I know we have in the policy that this policy and the regs will be included in those handbooks. Do you foresee this being in there verbatim or paraphrased and sort of reworded so that it's more reader friendly? I don't know if you've thought about that yet or not, or maybe that's a task for the summer.
Some of the best practice around that is to actually have the actual policy, but then in developmentally appropriate terms, what the policy actually means.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
We'll do Ms. Ionity and then Mr. Robsky and Mrs. Sherpier.
So in this policy, they talk about, I guess this is under students, 13A.
Okay.
A substantiated charge against a student shall subject such student to disciplinary action up to and including suspension or expulsion. Can we include in there restorative practices or counseling or something as an option? Or
Absolutely.
like, you know, also, you know, and or.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, Mrs. Ionity. In our student code of conduct, we put restorative practices in there, the actual words restorative practices, because we know many times just doing punitive discipline doesn't change behavior. So we want to make sure that we have that restorative piece. So I'll make sure that that's in there very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a really good pickup. Mr. Robsky.
Does it say anything about physical appearance, someone, you know, harassing someone's on basically on weight or size of the person? Would that be in there, included in there somewhere?
Perceived race, color, creed, gender, special order. We can add physical appearance.
Thank you.
Good catch.
Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Young. Or were you good?
I'm good. I was just
okay.
Sorry, I was
deep in thought. That's okay.
To be clear, so we can add that. I think Ashley Kitten is on the call. Ashley.
Yeah, I'm here. The only thing that I wanted to point out is a lot of our harassment policies, when we talk about those things or unlawful harassment, we look at, and speaking as half of the Title IX coordinator with Dr. Perez, we look at protected classes and who is being potentially targeted because of being part of a protected class. So unfortunately, some things that come with appearance are not protected. If one of those things because of appearance is also because of something that is a protected class, that might be something that we could look into. But I just wanted to make sure that we pay attention to that part of it as well.
Well, and that's a good distinction. And I wonder if too, the distinction also is covered by the bullying policy that we've reviewed previously, which would more capture Mr. Robsky's concern.
That's a good point.
Let's see. I think Mrs. Sherpier had her physical hand raised. I think her hand raising button doesn't work. So Mrs. Sherpier and then Mr. Schroeder.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Ms. Francis.
Sure.
Quick question. The harassment, the form of the harassment, is that in words, writing, electronic? Is there any distinction in this?
This covers harassment in any form.
And does that include include Facebook and things like that, or is that outside that? It would be outside of school.
So actually, the Supreme Court case that's going to be decided rather soon is going to probably require us to look at this maybe again in the coming months, because how that decision comes out will determine, how far we can go and if there needs to be a nexus back to the school district.
Good questions all. Thank you, Mr. Sirota, then Mr. Wallach.
Two things. One is going back to the protected class question. I guess, Ashley, does that apply? So I understand how the protected class thing works in terms of hiring and employment and all that kind of stuff. Does it apply to student? No, this is a policy about staff harassing. Who is this policy? Who's in scope on this policy, I guess, maybe is what
harassment by and of students.
Okay. So does the protected class language apply to students harassing students?
So it would help and depend on what we call it. And I know that that doesn't mean a lot to everybody. So first and foremost, Upper Dublin will never, ever, ever be okay with any form of harassment in any way. Right. But we need to know what to call it. Maybe it's Title IX, maybe it's Title VII, maybe it fits into another bucket. And then that determines some various things that we will need to do, some various people that we will need to get involved. And then that just gives us a prescribed set of rules to follow. So right. That's why I bring it up.
So those rules do apply in the student to student. That's what I want to make sure of those. Okay. So in that case, I wonder, going back to sort of Stan's question and how this might tie to the bullying policy, whether this wants to be a narrow, it's obviously huge, but a more narrowly defined on just the protected classes. And bullying is sort of deliberately covering the stuff that is not covered by protected class language. Because I think it's important, we do have ways that we must treat the protected class stuff. That is not completely up to us. Where the bullying language, no, actually that's not completely up to us either. There's state regulations around those. Okay, I think I talked myself into a circle here. What I was trying to come up with was a way to narrowly define these policies and how they relate to each other. And I still think there may be an opportunity, but without really putting it down and looking at the law, I don't have an answer.
That's fair. It happens. We all talk ourselves into circles some of these. Mr. Wallach, do you have any illuminating thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but to that point in this discussion, could we somehow articulate language in this policy to sort of break out the two facets? Meaning, I think there's value in this policy being broad and like including, for example, a non-protected class, as Stan noted, so that it's very clear, as Ashley just said, that no harassment is tolerated. But so could we articulate, like in the part where we're going to add some Title IX language or something in there to say, to the extent this involves a protected class, other parameters or procedures may control and govern. I don't know exactly how to say that, but Ashley, do you think that's at all doable in a policy like this?
Dr. Yanni, I think maybe we should look at how these interplay and maybe get an opinion, because I know that when we start talking about Title IX, there were some really specific languages that they asked us to and not to use. So I would hate to put in anything that is not suggested. So maybe let's look at those.
Why don't we do this? Why don't I put this on for our executive leadership team to look at? And then we can also ask the solicitor for input. If we can do this without a lot of changes, we can bring it back for a second read next month. If there are a lot of changes, it can just come back as a first read and it will just go into next school year. How about that? Does that sound?
That's great. You are a mind reader. Procedurally, that sounds great.
Thank you to Ashley for bringing it up.
Yeah, it's great discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Just
Jeff,
one other
would you like to-
comment.
Sure.
Yeah, to Ms. Sherpier's question, I mean, I think the existing policy, before we change anything, talks about verbal, graphic, or physical conduct relating to the types of harassment. So I just wanted it to be clear that I think our existing policy is broad, as Ms. Sherpier was asking the question, all of which, as Dr. Yanni said, may be subject to change and review depending on what the U.S. Supreme Court does in the case they heard argument on last week.
Great. And you know, I think the most important thing is just if you think of anything else as the executive leadership team is bringing this to discuss, get any additional comments or questions to Dr. Yanni as soon as possible. But thank you very much to everyone for that outstanding discussion. And we will move forward now to community input. I would ask members of the community who are on the call this evening to raise your virtual hand if you have any comments or questions, and you'll have the ability to state your name, where you reside, and 4 minutes to provide your feedback to the board regarding these matters. All right, seeing none this evening, I will close community input. I would like to share the Sunshine Act announcement that our next policy committee meeting will unbelievably be in June. On June the 2nd, 2021 at 7:15, we're immediately following our education committee meeting. Yes, we're finally talking about June. So thank you to everybody. And this meeting over policy committee is adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
So long.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.